Zullen we het dan een drinkje willen hebben of zo?
Peter, gaat het nu?
Achter de bar.
Hoe kan hij nu joinen?
Ja, hij vroeg net let me know when I should join. Dus
Oké. Ik zie hem nog niet.
Nog een keer uitnodigen. Maar mooi hè? Wat hangt op de...
Ja.
Podcast dan nou? Hey Julia.
What's up, guys?
I'm going to introduce you and then you can take it away.
Sorry?
Ik heb vandaag Julia uitgenodigd. I'm going to introduce you and then you can start.
Sure, yeah. No problem. Thanks.
Vanavond Julia uitgenodigd om te spreken. Hij heeft de WordPress hybrid client gemaakt. Het is eigenlijk een soort bootstrap om snel je hybrid app rond je WordPress site te zetten. En daar gaat hij vandaag nog wat over vertellen. Okay, take it away, Julia.
Yeah, I need to share my screen somehow. Let me try. How many people are there?
About 20.
20. Cool. I don't see you, but I'm happy to be here. How to do this?
You have options on the left of your screen.
Yes, got it.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Cool. Cool. So thanks for having me. Really appreciate being here, talking with you. I'd like to introduce a project I've been working on for the past 2 years, which is called WordPress Hybrid Client. If you want to follow me on Twitter, there is the Twitter handle here, and also these slides are available in my blog, on my blog. So before we start, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit. So I'm a software engineer from south of France, and I previously worked at eBay. And now I am working with TopTal as a freelancer and a community leader. TopTal is a platform for freelancers based in the US. And I do a lot of Angular 1 and 2 apps, Ionic 1 and 2 apps, and recently React applications as well. So what is WordPress hybrid client? It is basically a project that turns your WordPress website into a Android and iOS application. So it's a project I created 2 years ago for my own blog, which is myname.fr. And I was really surprised by the rating it got. So I got a lot of 5 stars, and I still do a lot of 5 stars reviews. If you want to try the application, you can, if you have a Android with you. So you can just type my name and you'll find the application. I don't have a iOS version of my own blog because iOS, Apple refused for many reasons. But if you go to the GitHub of the project, which is here, there's the link. You have a list of dozens of applications if you want to try on your phone for both iOS and Android. So I encourage you to go there right now if you can and try it out. So as I said, the project is now open source because I got a lot of good reviews and I wanted to share the work I did for this project. And it's based on a Ionic V1, ES6, and Webpack stack. And it has a lot of features built in. I'm going to see the list later. It has more than 500 stars on GitHub and more than 200 users on Gitter that ask questions on a daily basis. It supports 12 languages, and yeah, as I said, there is dozens of application already in the stores. This project covers all the WordPress entities you have on WordPress. So the posts, the pages, the custom posts, taxonomies, custom taxonomies, authors. There's a searching point as well, and also comments. It's highly customizable, so you have access to a configuration file where you can change any of the Ionic configuration through a JSON file. You can change all the cache config, all the query parameters. For instance, if you don't want the posts or the pages to be sorted by date descending, you can change by date ascending or by anything you want. Okay, you can select the languages you want to be shown on your application. And you can also configure all the Cordova plugins that it uses. We're going to see the list after this slide. We have also access to a menu file, which is also a JSON file, which is the side menu of the application. I'm going to show you that later. We have access to a Sass file where you can overwrite any Ionic variable and also any of the project variables. So it's highly customizable. And a feature I recently added is custom templates. So you can overwrite any of the templates of the app. It means any of the view, any of the directives, anything. If you don't like a button, you can remove it, or you can do whatever you want. We use push notifications, and I'm going to tell you more about this on another slide. We use, we can have Google Analytics, social sharing, ad mobs if you want to get some money out of your app, the app rate plugin, so people can rate after using the app like several times. And we also cache all the images, so you can scroll the app really smoothly. This project is based on this other project, which is WordPress REST API. It basically allows you to query anything from your WordPress website through a RESTful API. So that's a plugin you install in your WordPress, and then you can query through JSON anything you want. It is also based on this project, WordPress API Angular, which is a library that I created especially for this project, but a lot of people are using it, which is a wrapper for the WordPress API for Angular 1 and Angular 2. That's how you set the base URL of your WordPress API endpoint. So there is a provider. This is V1, of course, but V2 is a little bit different. So you set, all you need to do is set the endpoint of your WordPress API endpoint. Yeah. Then there is a lot of services that you can use, and this is an example on how to get a list of posts from your WordPress. So you can use WordPress API post service and the get list method. You can add parameters. You can select the page, how many items per page, all the filters you want, and then it resolves the promise with all the posts that you queried. That's as simple as this. And as you can see, you never specify the endpoints of how to get the post. Right? This is all handled by the library. So you just call get list on the specific service. And this is all the services that you have access to. You have access to all entities of your WordPress website. So that's the whole list. These projects allow you to send push notification directly from your WordPress website. So it is self-hosted and it's 100% free. So you can use the link that I put here. It's a plugin made by Delight Studio. And there is two versions of it. There is a free version, which works really well. And there is a paid version of it that gives you access to a lot of more data about what happened to your push notification, such as this image. So you can see how many iOS owner opened the push notification and how many Android owner opened the push notification. So WordPress Hybrid Client supports both the free and the paid version of this plugin. If you want to install the application, it's as easy as this. You need to clone the repository from GitHub. Then you can list all the tags using git tag, and you can check out the latest version of it. Then you need to run npm install, of course, and a specific script that is called install WordPress Hybrid Client. And then you can type npm start. And when you do this, it will use Webpack dev server to run a web server that will display this. This is a live example of what you have when you run npm start. And it's exactly the same when you build for iOS or Android. So this is the homepage, and you can also customize the homepage to be anything you want. But I wanted, and this is the default, so I wanted all the posts of my blog. So as you can see, I cannot scroll down. Okay, as you can see, there's all my posts here. You can see all the categories of any post by clicking here. You have all the categories of it, all the tags. You can bookmark the post. Okay, bookmarking a post means that it will be available offline, so you can open it like on the plane if you want, and you can share on social networks. Go to these posts in particular. Opens the post with the content of it, and as you can see, there is some syntax highlighter for like programming languages. It has also, you can also use YouTube videos in it. I don't know if I have an example here, but maybe this one. Yeah, there is a YouTube video on this one, so you can also see the video. The menu here is entirely customizable, so you can have anything you want. Here you can have categories that opens. So this is the page I'm in currently. It lists all the posts, but I can also select a specific post by the ID. Okay, it will render the post. You can display all the pages. This is all the pages I created. You can select one page. You can open the custom posts as well. So I created a custom post, which is movie. So I can list all the movies. Okay, this is all movies. And I can open one movie. Okay. You can list all the categories. So this is real dev data. So, I mean, this is dev data, but this is based on my Chrome blog. So if you want to, for instance, open articles about WordPress idle clients, so you click here, it will open all the posts that talks about WordPress idle clients. Okay. You can also see all the tags, exact same as a category. So you can click on ES6 and see all the posts that have ES6 as a tag. And also custom taxonomy. I created actor to link to movies. Okay, so you can list all the actors here. And these are all the actors that plays in my custom post movie. So you can click also on an actor, see all the movie they are linked to, open the movie, right? So you can do this. You can also list all the authors of your blog if you have many. So this is just me and some test users. But if you click on me, you will have all the posts that I created. Okay. What else? Bookmark, as I explained, this is for offline visualization. So if you open this one I created like 4 minutes ago, it opens it's in local storage, so you can use it offline. In the parameters, we have all the languages that we have access to. You can change the languages to the language to Chinese, for instance, right? And it's all Chinese. And then you can put it back to English. Yeah, this one. You can change the size of the content of your post. If you maybe sometimes it's too small, so you can change it. Here also, if you are on a real device, you will have access to push notification to turn it on or turn it off. And to finish, I think there is a search endpoint, so you can type like Ionic 2. And that's all the posts about Ionic 2 that I created. You can also, to finish, you can have external links if you want to have something that opens in the browser. Okay. So what's next for this project? I'm really excited about the fact that I'm preparing for a complete rewrite using Ionic 2. I've been using Ionic 2 for the past maybe 6 months, and I really love it. And I think right now it's mature enough to start building application with it, especially since they released AppScript. I don't know if you guys heard about AppScript. It's similar to what React does with create React app, right? And it uses rollup, so there's no configuration for you to create. It's all handled by rollup and the CLI. So it's really cool, and I'm going to use these tools because I really think now it's mature enough. They got rid of the gulp files and all of these tools that I didn't like. So I'm really happy about this move. And since it's really easy now with Ionic 2 to create progressive web app, I'd like to also enable this feature for this project. And I'm also a big fan of Redux. So for the past 6 months or even a bit more, I've been doing a lot of application with Redux. I use it all the time. I think it's really cool, and it works really great with Angular 2 as well. So I will use Redux to store all the data of the app. And that's it for me. Do you have any questions?
Yeah. Yeah. Dennis asked you a question yesterday if there was an Angular 2 version coming. So it's,
yeah, so the answer is yes. I've been really thinking about the architecture for the past 2 or 3 months now, and I haven't got the time to really hack into it because I do a lot of stuff and I sleep really a few hours a day, so it's really hard for me to really start hacking on this. But I'd like really to find time for the beginning of 2017. And if you guys are interested about this, we can talk on Gitter and maybe we can work together. That'll be really cool.
All right. Iemand anders? I've got a question here. Are you going to write the complete app again, or is it a rewrite?
Am I going to write what?
The app for Angular 2, are you going to do it all again, or is it just a rewrite of some components?
Yeah, it's a complete rewrite. I don't think we can do anything else. As I showed you, I created a WordPress API Angular library for Angular 2, and it's working. So I'm going to use this as the base foundation of this new rewrite project.
How long did you work on it? How many hours? Do you have an indication?
A lot of time. So as I explained, I started in November 2 years ago, so it's almost a 2-year anniversary of it, and I have more than 600 commits in it. I love doing it. It's really a lot of fun. I have also a lot of contributors helping me. There is more than 15 contributors, if I remember correctly, and it's really cool. It's really cool.
And do you have any stats? How many other companies or people are using your boilerplate?
Yeah, so there is a list in the repository about all the people that send me the actual link to the stores. But there is much more, and it's really cool because. So I'll explain. I worked at Total, right? And some clients created missions for this project. So adding some new features like the login or I don't know, any other feature that are not there yet. And it's really cool to see your project as that creates jobs, actual jobs.
You also built.
So the answer is I don't know exactly the number of applications that are out there, but maybe like 50 or something, maybe less than 100, something like this.
Okay. And you built the app for the Nederlandse skivereniging together with a colleague, I think. Did you make it with WordPress hybrid client?
This is not based. It's another app. Yes, I did with a friend in California, and it's not based on this project. It's homemade. And it uses one cool thing about it is it uses native transitions, which is also a library that I created to have native transitions for hybrid apps. And the project is deprecated because I don't have time to work on it, but this app is using it, and I think the transitions are really cool. If you can try it out, I encourage you to do so.
Right. Nog meer vragen? There are no questions anymore, so thank you for your presentation.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. Do you guys think there is a penalty on the game, on Monday game? Like France against Netherlands? You think there is a penalty or? I think there is a penalty, so I'm with you guys on this one.
Well, let's see who wins. Thank you for your presentation, and speak to you later.
Yeah, thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nou, Alex is ook wakker, dus... Nou, kom Alex. Twee. Eén. Allemaal. No, Alex, cool. Maar hij is die ene viewer. Nou, 2. Nou, Alex, het gaat niet echt soepeltjes. Ja, mocht je. En hoe lang duurt, gaan alle viewers weg. Nou. Ah. Nou, niet. Ja. Ja, hij is. Yes. Hi, Alex. Oh. Can you hear us?
Coming through?
Yeah, hello. Finally, Alex, we made it.
Hi.
We're all waiting for you. Okay.
A little bit there.
Yeah?
Yeah, I can give it a go.
Okay.
Let's see. Hello.
You okay? You can start
Okay,
now.
great. Okay, awesome. Sounds great. Let me just get my thing going here. I'll warn you now that I am on hotel Wi-Fi, so we will see how this goes. Okay, great. Can you see my slide? We good? Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We're ready to
Okay,
go.
great. You can see. Okay, great. You can see my slide. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So before I start, I just want to say thanks to the group for inviting me to come talk about Ionic 2. We'll talk remotely. Like I said, I'm on hotel Wi-Fi at the moment, so we will see how this goes. But let's persevere. All right. So Ionic 2, lots of things to talk about, lots of improvements, and I don't know if a good Doge joke carries across to the Netherlands, but I hope so, based on this slide. All right, so real quick, my name is Alex Muramoto. I'm a dev advocate at Ionic. You can reach me anytime by Twitter or directly on email. I also have a GitHub account where I post a bunch of code samples and such. Please do feel free to reach out at any time if you have any questions about not just Ionic and Ionic 2, but also Angular, hybrid app development, any of those kind of topics. That is my dog on the left side of the screen there, and she is usually how you can find me online, because I know that my name is difficult to spell, so it makes it a little bit easier to find me. She is, if you have not noticed, engaging in the great American pastime of horrible beer. If anyone there at any of the 20 or so of you at the meetup has ever been to the US before or is going to go to the US, I highly suggest that you try Pabst Blue Ribbon to the United States. All right, so real quick, in case anyone isn't too familiar with Ionic or Ionic 2, just what is Ionic? Ionic is a hybrid mobile framework for building mobile apps using standard web technologies, HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. It's built on Angular. In particular, today I'm going to be talking about Angular 2, or I'm going to be talking about Ionic 2, which is built on Angular 2, and is primarily written in TypeScript. Also, the framework is, and pretty much everything I'm going to talk open sourced under the MIT license, so fully able for you to use it in any project you want, commercial or otherwise. And of course, as always, one of the great sort of differentiating features of the Ionic framework is that it is built completely on web and browser standards. And I'll talk a little bit more about the implications of that shortly. So it's awesome, Ionic 2. Since this is the Ionic Meetup group, I assume that most people have at least played with Ionic 1 a little bit. Maybe you've played with Ionic 2 already. And it's pretty awesome. I mean, it's not like, T-Rex flying a jet kind of awesome. Like, we have a long way to go in technology before we actually get there, but it is pretty great. So just running down a quick list of kind of the main features of that make Ionic 2 better than Ionic 1 or improve on Ionic 1 is, of course, Angular 2 and TypeScript. We have improved theming, faster load times. The animations are smoother and faster than ever. We also have a number of new tools at your disposal, including Ionic Native for accessing code as a backend platform that will provide some of the services for your mobile apps. I'll get into that a little later on, and support for progressive web apps, which Julian touched on just a little bit. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Okay. So, but what really makes Ionic awesome is still and has always been the awesome developer community around it, and we owe so much of that to really great meetup groups like the one that all of you are a member of. So, right now, actually, now it's over 26,000 stars on GitHub. It's the #1 TypeScript project, including it's more popular than VS Code, Visual Studio Code, the official IDE of TypeScript. That's pretty cool. Consistently like a top 30 to top 50 project, hundreds of open source contributors to the framework over its history, and we're now topping over 250,000 NPM installs per month between Ionic 1 and Ionic 2. That is just NPM installs as well. So kind of exciting thing is that Ionic 2 already accounts for over a full third of those downloads. through NPM. We're also, in case you couldn't tell from this slide, pretty big fans of Pokemon Go. If anyone's ever used Ionic Creator before, which is our drag and drop tool for building Ionic 1 apps, Matt Kramer, who heads up that project, he is now level 30. It's pretty impressive. I don't know if that impresses any of the Netherlands, but it impresses the hell out of me. All right. You can find it. You can always find the source code as well for the project or for the framework on GitHub at driftyco/Ionic. Companies have also started using Ionic, both Ionic 1 and Ionic 2, very heavily for consumer-facing as well as internal-facing apps. This is just a few of them. And I only show this just so that if anybody is thinking about starting an Ionic project, is kind of just getting involved with the community, you can feel very safe that the framework is ready for production in prime time. A bit more awesome, something a little bit more exciting, in case you hadn't heard, Ionic 2 is now officially out of beta. A couple weeks ago, we announced the release candidate, RC0, for Ionic 2. That means that it is ready for you. This is real release candidate. We waited to go to RC until we did feel that the framework was ready. So now it's just out there being used, and we're only anticipating bug fixes and no breaking changes, no changes to the API itself. So please, if you have not started working with Ionic 2, to do so, it's fantastic. As always, if you want to try it out, -G Ionic, and then you can use Ionic Start to scaffold a simple starter project. Right now, to get a V2 starter app, you still have to pass the --V2 flag. That actually will, once we come out of the release candidate and have the final release, that will be going away, and V2 projects will be the default. Okay, let's get down to the actual details of what's new. What's the latest and greatest in Ionic 2. So first of all, of course, you have all of the UI components that you already know and love. The library of UI components that the framework provides is one of the main features. It's usually one of the first ways that developers come to become familiar with Ionic. So again, for anyone who's not familiar, everything from side menus to range sliders to toggles. There's directives to handle grid layout, action sheets, native pickers, all of the sorts of UI components that you would expect in any native app. And with Ionic 2, all of these have been optimized even further. So the performance that you will get, both in terms of the user interaction as well as the animations, out of all of these components is, if not the same as native. So that is a pretty exciting improvement for Ionic 2. As well, cross-platform styling has improved. This is a screenshot from Labs. So for anyone who doesn't know this, if you use Ionic Serve and pass the flag --lab, you will get this view, which will show you side by side how your app will look cross-platform on iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. And as before with Ionic 1, cross-platform styling absolutely free. I've done absolutely nothing, different platforms, to make any of these changes happen. One of the really nice things in Ionic 2 is that we've improved the framework, all the UI components, to conform to the individual platform style guides much more tightly than before. So iOS components will look like iOS components, Android components will look like Material Design, and Windows Phone uses the Windows Universal Style Guide. So you can run all of your apps cross-platform, and right out of the box, they will look very true they're running on. So you can see it's everything from subtleties like the height of list items, to the way that the search bar is rendered, to the positioning of the tab bar. Right, you can see on the bottom, it's on the bottom on iOS and Android, and it's on the top on Windows Phone. So all that you get out of the box, absolutely free. And of course, as with Ionic 1, custom, very easy everything is still done using plain CSS and using the Sass preprocessor. Very easy to override at both the component level, the individual directive level, if you'd like, and at the global level. Variables based as well. That has become much easier in Ionic 2. If you don't want to inspect the actual direct CSS of all of the various components to customize them the way that you want, just about every single aspect of styling of every UI component has a Sass variable assigned to it. And so that can make it very easy to declaratively override any of the default styling. And of course, as I said, everything is cross-platform. But if you did want to, make and put material design in your iOS app, you can fully do that. Usually it's just a matter of adding the appropriate iOS or MD or WP class to your component in order to make it conform to a different platform. Also 80+ mixins to make base theming very easy, so you can start building off of that. And also new to Ionic 2 is over 25 utility attributes. I'll get into those a little bit more later, but what these are HTML attributes that you can assign to your UI components in your templates to handle very common formatting cases like text alignment, vertical alignment, these sorts of things. And I'll look at it. I'll show you an example of that in just a little bit. Of course, as always, performance is our number one concern. None of this would really matter. It doesn't really matter how good the framework looks or how well it handles user interactions if it doesn't perform like native. So we are still kind of our number one concern. And this includes things like native scrolling. So if anyone who's familiar with the history of scrolling in hybrid apps, you know that historically what we had to do was kind of an emulated scrolling using JavaScript. So in Ionic 2 apps, all use native scrolling now. Animations, page transitions, 60 frames per second in almost cases. In the few number of cases where we have animations that are not at 60 frames per second, of literally single digits. So very, very close. And for the average user, completely imperceptible. It's going to look and perform just as before. Everything is optimized out of the box for touch events. In Ionic 2, you get very fast application and page loads thanks to some of the new features that come out of Angular 2, which again, I'll get into shortly. One thing that's going to give you a big performance here, WebView. So for those who are familiar with hybrid app development, which I assume most of you are, since this is the Ionic Meetup in the Netherlands, you know that what's going on under the covers is your standard web code, your HTML5, your CSS, and your JavaScript is being rendered in a web view by Apache Cordova. And as of iOS 8, hybrid apps had access to the latest and greatest web view on iOS, which is WK WebView. Previously, it was UI WebView. And WK WebView has really significant performance improvements. The only problem is that it was essentially unusable because of various issues, mostly around cores. So what we've done is we have forked the Cordova WK WebView plugin, and we now feel that it is ready to be used in production. So that link down at the bottom, that bit.ly link, will take you to the repo where you can try it out and literally to drop it into your existing project, whether it's an Ionic 1 or an Ionic 2 project, or really any other hybrid, any Apache Cordova project, is very trivial. It's just a few lines of code. One thing that WK WebView gives us access to on iOS is this little guy on the right. So WK WebView uses the latest and greatest WebKit JavaScript engine, and the WebKit name of that is Squirrelfish. Nicely as Nitro for commercial purposes, but in my heart, it will always be Squirrelfish, and it provides us with the greatest icon or logo in the history of computer science. Love it. So Nitro is actually the marketed name of Squirrelfish Extreme, which is the newest version of the JavaScript engine, and it brings all kinds of performance improvements to the party. So now what's really great as of Ionic 2, or as of very recently, is that on both iOS and Android, we have access to the most modern web views, so that's going to be Chromium and with the V8 engine on Android, WK Web View with the Nitro engine on iOS. And they give us a lot of really awesome performance improvements. The number one being that both of these JavaScript engines do just-in-time compiling of your JavaScript down to machine code. Has very big performance implications for how quickly and performantly your JavaScript executes. They also bring native scrolling, faster rendering, faster compute, and of course, access to the latest device APIs to all of your projects. So do definitely try it out. Like I said, to drop it into an existing project is really quite trivial. All right. So of course, the biggest difference in Ionic 2 is going to be Angular 2, right? The big breaking change Google a couple years. Angular 2 has now reached Angular 2.0 final. So it is in its final stable release. They're of course still fixing bugs, but it brings all kinds of really awesome stuff to your Ionic 2 projects. So real quick, often I ask the question, well, why should I bother to migrate? Why should I adopt Ionic 2 and Angular 2? And of course, the big thing is performance, but also Angular 2 applications are, by their very nature, component-based. So this makes Angular 2 code, in my opinion, much simpler to build and to reason about what's going on. It keeps your code much more modular just by default. And also the syntax for Angular 2 is much simpler and much more approachable than Angular 1 syntax ever was. And a lot of this is just a product of the time, right, when Angular 1 was created. Now we have JavaScript is a lot more advanced than it was in 2010. And Angular 2 really takes advantage of that. The dependency injection system, also much nicer than the DI system in Angular 1. We'll look at that in just a moment. And the biggest implication for Ionic apps is that Angular 2 was designed from the ground up for mobile. So when the Angular team was making choices for how to design Angular 2, they always kept in mind that it would need to run very well on mobile devices, which was not an affordance that was really there when they designed Angular 1, which was primarily meant to just build web apps for desktops. Like I said, both Angular 2 apps, and as a result, Ionic 2 apps are written in TypeScript. You do not have to write them in TypeScript. You can write both Angular 2 and Ionic 2 apps in standard ES6. I wouldn't recommend it, A, because the documentation for TypeScript is much better, but also B, because TypeScript is really awesome. And I'll be totally honest, I was about as skeptical about switching to TypeScript as anybody, but totally honestly, it's really fantastic. If you haven't tried it, it's trivial to learn it. And once you start using some of the features of TypeScript, I think you're going to really love it. So for anyone who's not familiar, set of JavaScript, that means that it adds some syntactic sugar on top of ES6. And at build time, all of that compiles down to standard ECMAScript. Some of the things that it also brings to the party are full support for ES6, handles all the polyfills for you for older browsers, and static type checking. This is, of course, what TypeScript is kind of most known for, is that it adds static typing to your toolbox. And this has really big implications, especially for the tooling. So A, static typing will really, truly help you avoid a lot of common, easy to find bugs before they ever happen. This is great because believe me, the first time that from a simple syntax error, you will be very happy. Tooling for things like code hinting in your IDE, as well as other features like mass refactoring. Script is really fantastic. You should definitely give it a shot. This is a quick, just for anyone who hasn't done Angular 2 before, here's a quick example of what the syntax looks like. And I think for anyone who is familiar with Angular 1, you'll already see that this feels much more approachable than Angular 1 did the first time that you saw it. So at the top, we just have imports. We use TypeScript import statements, and this is for the dependency injection. So we're just pulling in some dependencies. The next part is the component decorator. So TypeScript introduces this concept of decorators, which allow us to specify metadata about the component that in this case, the Angular compiler can use to know what it's actually trying to compile. And we're just inside of the metadata for the component specifying an HTML template as well as some CSS styles. And of course, right, for the purpose of this, I have it inlined, but all of that externalized very easily, which you'll see shortly. And then the new version of the controller is just handled with a simple class statement. So you can see we're just exporting this class, and inside of it we have a constructor, and we're declaring a couple member variables as well as a real quick member function. All right. So one of the consequences of this new use of classes in Angular 2 that is really great is it also adds some very common programming constructs that will be familiar to people who have written in languages other than JavaScript. So because of classes, we also get nice keywords like extends and implements, and we get things like write interfaces. So this also is great because it makes JavaScript much more approachable and Angular much more approachable to developers who don't have a JavaScript background. So that's pretty nice as well. On the template side of things, when it comes to Ionic, it's going to look very familiar to you. The syntax of Ionic 2 has not changed drastically. You can see that in terms of the structural things like data binding for Angular 2. The syntax has changed a little bit. We have these square brackets and these parentheses. But the number one thing that you'll notice between Ionic 1 and Ionic 2 is that we've shifted slightly to rather than classes, to favor the use of directives and attributes. So as an example, if you look down at the bottom at the grid layout, for example, at the columns, you can see now we have a directive ion-call, and I'm giving it a width using the attribute width-10, whereas previously in Ionic 1, this would have been a div, and it would have had a class of call and also a class of call-10. And we feel like this makes the code much more readable and much easier to maintain. Because you don't end up with this long set of class declarations on your components, but also it really helps to separate out providing as a baseline versus what you're going to provide for customization, right? So generally what you're going to see is everything that's going to show up in the class declarations in your components are going to be your customizations, whereas everything that the framework is providing is going to be an attribute or a directive. Okay. By the way, if anyone has any questions as I'm kind of roaring through all this, please do feel free to interrupt me at any time. So the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things that Angular 2 also brings to performance for hybrid mobile apps in general, but especially to Ionic 2, is this concept of ahead of time compiling. So if you're not familiar with the happens in an Angular app, including an Angular 2 app, is that all of your Angular code compiles down to standard JavaScript just in time at runtime. So there's definitely a performance hit that you take because of this. So in one of the last releases before they went final, and now of course it's in the final release, the Angular team introduced this concept of ahead of time compiling. What this allows us to do is to do all of the TypeScript and JavaScript, or TypeScript and Angular compilation at build time instead of runtime. This is great because it gives us a much smaller bundle that we have to deploy. The smaller bundle is the result primarily of two things. One is that the Angular compiler no longer needs to ship with our code. Very big deal, especially for mobile apps, right, where the resources, like the amount of storage on the device, is limited. And because TypeScript gives us static type analysis, at build time we can also implement some cool features such as tree shaking, which basically tree shaking, what it does is it traverses the dependency tree, and using static code analysis, it figures out all of the code that's basically never being called in our app and removes it from the bundle. So this has very big implications for bundle sizes. In particular, as an example, the Angular team has told us that they've gotten their simple Hello World app down to as small as 28K. So that's pretty significant. The other implication of this is that because we're not doing that just-in-time compiling, because everything is compiled in advance, we get much, and because the code is much more optimized by the time it ships, we get much faster app launches. In some cases, we've seen the initial app launch reduced by a factor of like 8, as well as faster component loading when your views are first instantiated, when you navigate from view to view. Okay. On the Cordova side of things, as far as accessing native APIs, because obviously you need that in your hybrid apps, we've also introduced Ionic Native. So Ionic Native as a project, it's another open source project, MIT license, and it was announced very shortly after the beta of Ionic 2 was announced. I believe that was the timeline. In any case, Ionic Native is essentially just a way to create TypeScript wrappers for existing Cordova plugins. So you can access your native device APIs, but wrapped in TypeScript. So you get all of those advantages of TypeScript that I already talked about, as well as added support for promises and observables. Anyone who's done a lot of work with Cordova plugins knows that almost all plugins still use the standard callback pattern, which can get very messy when your code gets very complex. So Ionic Native adds promises and observables support to make that much easier. And I also like to point out that even though it's called Ionic Native, it is completely framework agnostic. You can use Ionic Native plugins in any TypeScript project. So whether you're doing an Angular 1 project or an Angular 2 project or any other TypeScript project or hybrid, you have full access to all of the Ionic Native plugins. This is just a quick example of what it looks like. So that's that you'll recognize from the code I showed you earlier, we have the simple import statement. So we're just pulling in the geolocation plugin from Ionic Native. And then I use this as an example because most people are familiar with geolocation for their hybrid apps. You can see that we're just calling the standard get current position or the standard watch position from that plugin. And you can see that it's added the support for promises and observables to make the code a little cleaner and a little nicer to code. This is just a short list of the plugins that are currently available in Ionic Native. So this is not an exhaustive list. There are quite a few more plugins that have already been wrapped for you that you can use right now. And of course, on top of this, you have access to the entire Cordova ecosystem as well. So just because Ionic 2 apps are written in TypeScript does not mean that you have to wait for an Ionic Native plugin to be released in order to use a particular Cordova plugin in your app. But what I will say is that if you take a look at the Ionic native project, you'll see that creating those TypeScript wrappers for any given plugin is extremely trivial. So if there is a plugin that you're thinking about using that is not currently supported in Ionic native, I definitely encourage you to give it a shot and create your own Ionic native plugin for it. The other thing that we have that's new that recently came kind of quietly out of beta is Ionic Cloud. So Ionic Cloud is a platform that provides standard backend services that are commonly needed in mobile apps, particularly also in hybrid apps. So this includes things like a framework for implementing push notifications, as well as user management. So not just managing user profiles and identity, also handling login, so OAuth. On top of that, we also have tools to do things such as native builds. So for anyone who's familiar with PhoneGap build, this would be analogous to that, because sorry to break it to you, Windows or PC users, you will never ever be able to build an iOS app on your PC. If it ever happens, I will be so shocked. I don't even know what I'm going to do. So it's a great service that allows you to get your native builds cross-platform. Also supported is a service called Ionic Deploy, which handles one of the kind of big advantages that hybrid apps have, which is dynamic loading of JavaScript, right? So Ionic Deploy is a platform to allow you to deploy, to do hot fixes, to do hot swaps of code in your mobile app. And it also has features to support things like A/B and beta testing, so that you can roll out as well as roll back new code. And this can be, everything from very small changes like styling changes to enormous changes like new features. As well, Ionic Cloud has a really nice free tier for developers. These are all monthly limits. You get 10,000 push notifications a month. You can do over 5,000 app updates using Ionic Deploy. You can get 100 native builds and manage an unlimited number of users. So this is really great if whether you actually use it in production or just to sort of start prototyping some of the features of your app. If you want to check it out, you can go to ionic.io/cloud. So what all this means at the end of the day with Ionic 2 is that it's easier than ever to kind of realize the original promise of hybrid app development, which is code once and run everywhere. You have a single team, a single code base, and it's going to run across every platform. And when I say run everywhere, I don't just mean for mobile devices, right? I'm not just talking about iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. We're also talking about the mobile web as well, right? Because remember, everything in Ionic 1 and Ionic 2 completely built on web and browser standards. So that means everywhere that the web is, you can run an Ionic app, including some of the really interesting new technologies that are maybe coming next, such as progressive web apps. So real quick, progressive web apps, this is something that Google has been making a lot of noise about recently, and supported in Chrome and Opera, very soon coming to Windows Phone as well. And a progressive web app is essentially a mobile app. It installs an icon to the home screen. For all intents and purposes to the user, it looks just like a native mobile app, except that it runs entirely from the web. That means absolutely no app stores are involved. That has really big implications for the future of mobile development, in my opinion. And if anyone has any questions about that, we can talk about that a little bit more at the end. But the important thing to know about progressive web apps is they support they look and feel and perform just like a native mobile app. They even work offline. Again, they install the home screen with an icon, just like any other app. And as well, Ionic apps, and Julian touched on this a little bit, Ionic apps already are progressive web apps. Basically, you can drop in a manifest file, and a service worker, which handles a lot of the offline capabilities. And your Ionic app is already a progressive web app right out of the box. If you want to check out some examples, you can go to pwa.ionic.io. Also, a couple of colleagues of mine from the core from the core framework team, Adam and Brandy, they did a really nice talk on PWAs recently at the Angular Connect conference in London. So that link at the bottom there is where you can find that talk. Right? Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'm going to just show a quick example of what it's like. So I'm just starting Ionic Serve. Real quick, I'll run through what's in this project. Hopefully, if you can't read this code, let me know. Okay, so this is the project structure for a standard Ionic 2 template app. I did this just using that normal Ionic start command, and I've just done some of the boilerplate code already just to save us a little bit of time, so you don't have to watch me write a bunch of boilerplate. Here in the app, we have the core component, right? This is the core app component where we can do some of where the bootstrapping of the app happens. Couple other things to notice. Here in www, we have like the index.html file, which you'll remember, which is the proverbial single page or a single page application. Back here under what we really care about though mostly is everything in the source directory. So as I said, we have app, we have assets. This is where you can put all of the static assets for your application images and what have you. Down here in the themes, we have this variables file. You can see that, as an example, I was talking before about how there's stats variables for everything. So this is the base color map. I've added something here already. Let's see, on top of that, progressive web apps have first-class support in Ionic 2. So anytime you use Ionic Start to create a new template, you'll get a sample manifest file and service worker right out of the box that you can use to start playing with progressive web apps. All right, the thing we really care about, this pages directory. This is where all the pages are going to be for your application. We have a template file, right? This is pretty basic. Come back to it in a second. I've pre-written about a dozen or so lines of CSS just to give us some styling. Now here in the home.ts file, this is the TypeScript file that is the actual controller for my page, for my component. So I've done some dependency importing here. Nothing too surprising. Here in the component metadata, first you'll notice this is a little bit different than the example I showed you earlier. For Ionic 2 projects, when we have a component that's a page, we pass it a selector tag. So this selector is the actual HTML element that's going to be injected into the DOM at runtime, where that's going to represent the directive for this page. So if we were to, once we look at this app, if we were to introspect the DOM, we would see this page home tag. And template URL is just pulling in our home.html over here. Real quick, just declaring a couple objects. So what I'm going to be doing with this app is this. So this is what you're seeing here is the actual view on my phone. Pretty cool feature of QuickTime if you've never used it before. And you'll see it's just a real simple app, has search, and will find nearby places to eat. Right now, I'm in Los Angeles, particularly in Culver City, so that's why you're seeing these kind of results. Set up a simple API to just fetch my location results. So I'm declaring a variable restaurants, which is going to have an array that holds an array of objects, and a search term, which is a string. In the constructor, I'm instantiating a couple or a few of the dependencies that I imported earlier. And then in the constructor, I'm calling this getRestaurants function. This getRestaurants function is calling request, which is going to actually make my HTTP request to my my little API. It's just a little node API. And down here is where the actual HTTP request happens using Angular 2's standard HTTP module. So again, the syntax is really nice, very simple. This.http get. Let's see, oops. Not sure why I'm getting red underlined there. I shouldn't be, but all right, let's give it a go. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I've started this in Ionic Serve, so you can see it here in the browser. Let me just resize this a little bit. Cool, and I'm emulating an iPhone 6. So let's start by adding a few things to the template. I'm going to start with an ion list. And inside of that, an ion item. This is analogous to your standard unordered list and list tag, so UL and LI, but we use the Ionic version so that we get that UI component styling as well as the performance improvements. And for every restaurant that comes back in that array. So to do that, I'm going to use the structural directive mg4, which is standard in Angular 2. For anyone who's familiar with Ionic 1 and Ionic 2, Ionic 1 and Angular 1, this is the new version of ng repeat. So I say let restaurant of restaurants, okay? And that's going to just repeat this list item for every item in the array. And so that you don't have to watch me write a bunch of boilerplate, I will use the time-tested and true tool of our profession as developers and copy and paste. But this is all very standard. As you can see, there's an image tag, I have an H2, there's some P tags. For those who, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Ionic 1, so you'll recognize the double curly braces. And here, I'm just binding the source attribute to the value of the thumbnail for each individual restaurant. So if I save this, we'll see that Ionic Serve is going to Ionic 1, particularly because just a lot more is going on, especially that ahead of time compiling. But we already have performance optimizations in the works. Let's just make sure that we don't have an issue here. Cool. And I get my data in my list items, right? So pretty good, but not really looking too good yet. By the way, all of these places are in Madison, Wisconsin, the home of Ionic. So coming back, let's add a little bit of formatting. Say ion grid, we'll use that grid component that I showed you earlier. Inside of the grid is a row. Anyone who hasn't used this before, it'll be very familiar if you've ever done Bootstrap. My row and my grid. And I'm a little obsessive compulsive, so I'll make sure that my tabs are correct. I'll save this. There we go. Cool. So getting better. Ion Grid is based on Flexbox, so you can see that it's sort of apportioning everything for me automatically. But the layout is not really good yet. So let's go ahead and add some columns inside of it. And all this has changed, right? Is I've just put everything in columns. So the image is in like the leftmost column, and then I have some data in the middle column and some on the right. And so let's see, let's go ahead and save that. So we'll take just a moment. Cool. Okay, so better, but there's still some other stuff that I probably want to do right. Like I probably want this to be flush right. I'm running into some various problems, like you can see here, because this name is very long, it's forcing out this image over here. Also, I'm getting some bad text wrapping. So let's go ahead and use some of those attributes that I told you about. So one example, I'm going to say text wrap here. On the first column, width 25. And on the last column, I'm going to say width 20, as well as text height. That. Will it blend? And so now I get my really nice formatting. This is all right aligned for me. Everything, all the images are looking good. And because this is Flexbox, right, I gave it an explicit percentage for this side, and for this column is filling in nicely. And here's that text wrapping that I applied as well. One last thing to add to this is just, right here I'm getting the number 2 instead of getting a nice, some stars, right, from my reviews. That in here. As well as pricing. I want dollar signs, right, because I'm in the US. So I'll put this down here. And all that you're seeing here is I'm using the Ion icon directive, which gives me access to the library of almost 1,000 Ionicons that also get styled cross-platform. We do the platform detection, and we'll change this out for you. So I'm using the star icon, and I'm repeating it the number of times of the rating. This little helper function, get array. If we come back here and we look at this, so NG4, right, it can only iterate over, guess what, an iterable. And so all I have to do is have this little helper function, which is just going to return an array for me. Save this. There we go. And boom, I've got my nice layout. A couple more things to add though, right? I have to add, if we go back and we look at what I had here, right? I want to have search. I also want to make this location aware. To make it location aware, I'm going to use one of those Ionic native plugins. I'm going to say Ionic plugin add, and then we just add it by name. So it's Cordova plugin geolocation. While we wait for that, I will start writing the code for it. Here in the TypeScript file, oops, you can get restaurants. I want to do a couple things. First, I want to say this.platform. So platform is the Ionic platform. It's the dependency I pulled in here. And I need to just make sure that it's ready, right? Because I can't load my Cordova plugins unless the platform is ready, has fully loaded Cordova. And this returns a promise. So I say this platform ready then. And for geolocation, I'm going to import that. I'm going to say import geolocation from Ionic native, so that I can then down here say geolocation dot get also returns a promise. Give me a location. And I'm just going to pass that location. All right, which you can see in the method signature here. it optionally takes this location object. Right? You'll also notice that in the grand tradition of any good, I'm not handling my errors. So we can go ahead and save this. To reload, I'm also going to go ahead and add a search bar. So I say ion search bar. And here I'm using the ng model directive. So this is just going to bind the input value in the search bar to a value on the model. In this case, that search term string that I had declared before. In enter 2, especially when you're binding forms, this is what they call banana box. You have the square brace, which binds in one direction, and then parentheses, which binds in the other direction. So this is a kind of longer hand for a two-way data binding. And then I'm also going to bind to search event, and this is the event that is emitted by the Angular 2 framework. Whenever you're using the keyboard and you hit the go button, right, inside of your app. So ion search bar, and I'm going to just have ion search bar call response. Cool. A quick look back here. So the delay that you are seeing here is because of my slow little demo API. Well, since it's doing that, let's go ahead and save this. Also, I'm going to just uncomment this. This just changes the query to my API to include that location data. Whereas before I was hard coding it to method, right? Let me just restart. So real quick, this is leaving your install before you do a demo is bad luck. Ionic serve real quick. We'll give that a moment. Cool. Make sure everything's good. Everything looks good. There we go. Just took a second. I'll come back and look at the developer tools, and you can see that I'm getting my location-specific results, and search works. I don't know how all of you feel, but after listening to myself talk for 45 minutes, I do need a bar, even though it is 10 in the morning here. Again, just waiting for my API to load some results. I get bars, get my nice layout. So this is pretty awesome because, right, we've already built the basics of lines of controller code, about 35 lines of template code, and with about a dozen lines of CSS. Not too shabby. Last thing that I'll do, just so you can see it, is actually deploy this to my device. So I'll say Ionic run, iOS, -- device. And this will take a moment. It's going to do the full production build, so it's going to do even more ahead of time compiling. Here, you'll actually see it launch. While we wait for that, let me just wrap up real quick. If you want to see this app in action, what I've actually been demoing it to you what I've actually been using to demo it with up until now is Ionic View. This is for people who don't know, this is a free app that is available both on the Google Play and on the iOS App Store, where you can basically run Ionic Upload from the command line inside of your project, and it will upload the bundle, and it allows you to very easily share your app with whoever you want. This is particularly great if you do a lot of contract work, or if you have a manager or a director that wants to see updates. You don't have to mess around with sending a bunch of check it out. You can actually look at this app. I've already uploaded it, and in Ionic View, you would just enter this app ID. I'll also make these slides available so you don't have to rush to write that down if you don't want to. Thing, everything is open source in Ionic. As I said before, the framework, Ionic Native, the CLI, and if you fancy yourself a part of the open source variety, please do join the hundreds of other developers that have contributed to the framework and contribute. Personally, contribute to the CLI because I'm terrible at Bash, but maybe you're great at Bash, so that would be really fantastic. And real quick, there's my app. So you can see that everything works, right? And I can look up bars because I need a bar. Bars, right? So again, anytime, email or on Twitter, happy to answer any questions that you have. And thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Any questions? Well, you can come over here. We have one question.
Sure.
Yeah, it's coming. Okay.
Hi, Alex. Hello? You there?
Hi, Alex, you still there?
I will ask you on Twitter.
Yeah, okay. No, okay, thanks, Alex. No, Leonard.